So my name is Tamsin Mather. I'm a professor of volcanology at the University of Oxford, and I study volcanoes. Welcome to my exp. So the name volcano comes from an island called Volcano, which is just to the north of Sicily in Italy. It's part of a group of islands called the Aeolian Islands. Includes other famous volcanoes like Stromboli. And at a crucial point in time, a volcano erupted and made a big impression. So the name volcano or volcano is imprinted in many European languages as the generic name for volcanoes. Volcanoes have the potential to completely rewrite a landscape. So if we're thinking about lava flows, they will overflow local vegetation, they will burn local vegetation. So you sometimes end up with hollows in lava flows where it has flowed and then actually burnt a tree out of itself, and it's left this kind of imprint behind. Often actually the air quality is worse because the lava flows are flowing over moss or other vegetation, and the burning vegetation adds to the pollution that the volcanic gases are causing. If you have a really explosive eruption, that can scatter ash and other debris over a really wide area. So that completely mantle the whole topography. So sometimes it's described in Pliny and in other accounts as being like a kind of, almost like a snowfall event where the whole landscape has been cloaked in the volcanic ash. So you can completely rewrite a landscape, and to begin with it'll seem to be completely devoid of vegetation and animals. Volcanoes are a manifestation of Earth's inner energy, if you like. So inside the Earth it's very hot. Some of that heat is actually primeval heat retained from when the Earth was formed, when it was accreted, when it came together from the different building blocks. And some of that heat is from the radioactive decay of different atoms and different isotopes within the Earth over geological time. So there's lots and lots of heat and energy inside our planet, and volcanoes are the manifestation of that. And there's lots of ways that plays out. So in terms of the heat that drives explosive eruptions, but also the gases that are dissolved inside magmas. So when those gases come to the surface, they come out of solution. It's a bit like opening a fizzy drink. And you get that hissing sound, and if it's been shaken up, sometimes it's explosive. So it's a little bit like that. The gases are coming up and they're under pressure, and the pressure drops. So it's like coming from deep in a swimming pool to shallow. So those gases come out of the solution, you've got bubbles forming, and then those bubbles want to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and when it gets to the surface, they might be so big that the magma can't actually contain them anymore, and you get a massive explosion. So there's lots of different things that drive volcanic power. So the Tambora eruption happened in 1815 in Indonesia. And the year after the Tambora eruption is sometimes referred to as, in more modern times, as the year without a summer. But there's plenty of evidence from the time itself that people realised that they were having very atypical weather. So there was snowfall in New England. There was a big disruption to harvests and things like that in Europe. So there are accounts of rioting in France. In Switzerland, people were sort of forced to eat moss and their pets. The weather was terrible, so Mary Shelley and Lord Byron, who were on holiday by Lake Geneva, couldn't get out and about, and they entertained themselves with writing poetry like Byron's poem Darkness. And then Mary Shelley came up with the idea for what would become Frankenstein. There's lots of evidence for the disruption of the weather. And the cause for that was this sulfate aerosol veil. So the sulfur dioxide had been punched up into the stratosphere where it tends to linger around, and had ended up chemically changed or oxidized to these fine sulfate particles. And that fine hazy layer circling the planet reflects the sun's rays more back out into space and cools the atmosphere down, and it disrupts global weather patterns. So we've seen this more recently after the 1991 Pinatubo eruption in the Philippines. And of course, in 1991, we were able to understand it and study it in much more detail, because now we have global satellite observations. So we can really try to get to the heart more of what's going on scientifically. Sometimes people just think of volcanoes as being very, very destructive. But one of the things that really inspires me about volcanoes is how important they've been as well for the development and maintenance of our beautiful habitable planet. So as far as we know, this planet is unique in the universe. It may well turn out not to be the case, but as far as we know, in terms of hosting life. And for a complex life like ourselves to evolve, we've needed a degree of stability of the climate. And actually, volcanoes play a really key role in that. So in our atmosphere, we have carbon dioxide. We've learned a lot about that recently, and we know about the negative effects of carbon dioxide. But we do need some carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, otherwise the planet would be incredibly cold. A bit of the greenhouse effect is really important to keep Earth warm enough. And volcanoes put out lots of carbon dioxide, not as much as we're putting out right at the moment. And that's part of this system of balance. So volcanoes put out carbon dioxide in their emissions, and that's actually balanced by natural processes which take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere in rainfall and then react it with rocks in something called chemical weathering, and then it gets drawn down into the oceans. And if the planet gets hotter, then that weathering flux, that weathering rate actually increases and pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, so the planet cools down. And if the planet gets colder, the weathering rate decreases, so carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere. So what we actually have is our very own thermostat. It operates over very long geological timescales, and it's been particularly effective over the last 500 million years because of the biology that we have involved. But it's a wonderful example of how our planet's natural cycles are within certain bounds balanced, and volcanoes play a really key role in that. I think there's a lot we can learn from volcanoes in terms of the current climate crisis and in terms of uncertainty. So actually, if we think about the natural cycle of carbon dioxide emissions, the rate at which volcanoes are putting carbon dioxide out into our atmosphere at the moment gives us a sort of benchmark which we can compare ourselves to. And actually, the evidence suggests humankind is putting carbon dioxide out at about 60 times the rate of the world's volcanoes at the moment. So we're really beating volcanoes. So this gives us a kind of a benchmark to judge ourselves by in terms of how much we're changing the system, how much we're perturbing the system. And I think if we look back into deeper time, into the very greatest episodes of volcanism, and I'm talking about these large igneous provinces, which are these instances when for about 1 million years, the rate of volcanism on the planet kind of doubled because you had these big outpourings of basalt onto the surface of the planet. And if we look at those, we can actually study in the geological record the environmental consequences of those, and they're pretty dire. I mean, the big 5 mass extinction events, at least 3 of them and probably 4 of them correlate in time. They occur at roughly the same time as these great outpourings of volcanism, which then doubled the rate potentially of carbon dioxide being emitted to the atmosphere. And we're emitting carbon dioxide about 60 times the rate of volcanoes. So I think it's a big warning. I think it's another piece of evidence to suggest that we really must grapple with our global responsibility as a species to try and minimise the impact that we're having on our atmosphere and environment.